The gospel reading which we have today is very familiar to us, the Beatitudes. We read the Beatitudes all the time. So allow me to reflect with you for these few moments on understanding in a deeper way the gift, the teaching of the Beatitudes. They come from the 5th chapter of the Gospel of Matthew. It's the beginning of what is familiar to us as the Sermon on the Mount. And in Matthew's Gospel, it goes on for 3 chapters, chapter 5, 6, and 7. And I want to suggest that in order to understand the Beatitudes, we must somehow read the entire Sermon on the Mount, chapter 5, 6, and 7. 1 or 2 exegetical points for those who are in Bible study. You'll notice that it says Jesus went up on the mountain. Matthew's gospel being a Jewish gospel, the mountain is very important. The mountain is a symbol of the place where God reveals himself. Back to Mount Sinai, the Mount of Transfiguration, the Mount of Calvary. And now we have the Mount of Beatitudes, where Matthew begins this long section called the Sermon on the Mount. It has a parallel in Luke's Gospel in chapter 6, but Luke is very brief. Matthew is very long in the Sermon on the Mount. The second subtle but rather important point here is when Jesus goes up on a mountain, he sits down. The rabbi always sat when he was teaching. For Bible study persons, you will remember the 4th chapter of Luke's Gospel, the beginning of Jesus' public ministry. He goes into the synagogue at Nazareth. They hand him the scroll of the prophet Isaiah. He reads from the prophet Isaiah, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, and I am sent," and he reads on. And after this, he rolls up the scroll, hands it back to the attendant, and he sits down, and he begins to teach. That would have been very important now to those who first listened to the proclamation of the Beatitudes and the continuation of the Sermon on the Mount. One other exegetical point is important, and that is the word blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed, that's a Greek word. It's makarios. It means blessed, but it means something far deeper and far more profound in the classical Greek. It means a deep inner tranquility. It means my place of depth, serenity, inner peace, a place without conflict. It means there's something very settled about the experience of makarios. So keep that in mind when we begin to reflect on the teaching of this gospel. Let me begin this way, in a descriptive metaphor. It's my story, and it's probably your story also. In the metaphor description, there is a place, a space. There's a space in your life and in my life. A sacred space, and certain people belong in this space. There's a belonging, a bond. Others are welcomed into this space, this sacred space, and others are transitional. They come and they go. And we call this space home. Home is more than an address. It's more than a place. Home is an experience. Home is a fundamental, formative, foundational experience in life. Now, some people have shelter. They have a place, so to speak, an address, but they don't have a home. It's not sacred space. The Hindus, in the 4 stages of life, the 4 passages of life, the first is you're a student. The second, you're a householder or a settler. And they remind us of something very important. In this settled experience, it has emotional, sexual, it has an environmental, it has a spiritual presence, something formative that tends to touch the whole person. That's holy ground. And that's the ground of sacred space that we call home. Not everybody has this, by the way. There are various kinds of homeless persons in our society. We are faced with a huge social problem of people who have no shelter. But there's another issue, which is easier to overlook. And that is that the deepest yearning we have in life, I've said this many times here at Holy Family, is a safe place. We're all yearning for a safe place. I'll tell you what's not safe. When somebody says, "I can't believe you did that," I say, "Oh, not safe. It's a place of judgment." "I can't believe you said that." Wow. I tend to pull back. Safe place is a place where I'm accepted for who I am. I am blessed, I'm forgiven, I'm included, I'm understood. I don't have to merit, I don't have to perform, I don't have to earn. I'm embraced for who I am. We call that home. Sometimes a marriage is a safe place. Tragically, sometimes it's not a safe place. Sometimes an address, that's a safe place. Sadly, there's a poverty sometimes at the address, poverty of loneliness, of misunderstanding, poverty of conflict, which leads a person to be adrift in a very real way, to be homeless. I'm looking for holy ground, a safe place. Let me give you some examples of this. 50 years ago or more, when I was young, and I worked down at the Archdiocese, there were 3 of us priests who belonged to the LA Athletic Club. We used to work out at the LA Athletic Club, fantastic club, every day, 5-6 days a week maybe. Sometimes in the morning, or if we were busy, or sometimes it might be the evening. One evening, I was leaving the club. It was about 7 o'clock or 7:30 in the evening. And as I was leaving, I noticed some men in the bar whom I knew. So I went in to say hello to them. And I said to them, "How come you guys are not at home? I mean, it's 7:30. You finish work at 5 o'clock or 5:30. And one of them said to me, we don't like being at home. That struck me. I said, wow, sounds like a homeless person. You don't have sacred space. It appears you don't have a safe place. Henry Nouwen, familiar to most of you, celebrated author, more than 40 books. I remember reading the first book I read by Henry Nouwen in 1970 or 71 was The Wounded Healer. An extraordinary, celebrated author, a man of letters, highly acclaimed. He was a professor at Notre Dame, at Yale, and at Harvard. World-famous man, highly popular. Every kind of applause was given to him. And yet, he was unsettled. He was looking for holy ground. Most of his life, despite all the applause and all the accolades, there was a certain homeless spirit in him. And he searched and searched. He was at Notre Dame. That wasn't, and then went to Yale, and then he went to Harvard. And then he quit teaching. He went down to Bolivia and Peru in South America. He was searching for some settled place. In 1986, 10 years before he died, he went to Daybreak, which is a Larche home for persons who have special needs. He went there, he thought maybe this would be a home for him. When he arrived there, he wrote a book called Road to Daybreak. When he arrived there, and his diaries appear in a recently published book called Home Tonight. When he arrived there, he was put in a small cohort, about 7 or 8. These little pods ate together and communed together. There was one man there in this group, an adult, and the first question he asked Henry Nouwen is, "Where is your home?" Henry Nouwen had no answer. He didn't have a home. He was a transient. He was a nomad, a famous but nomad. And then a few nights later, at dinner, he asked Henry Nouwen, "Are you home tonight?" Henry Nouwen got the feeling that there was an invitation in here, and he had to leave to give some more talks or to do something else. He writes about this in his journals, how unsettled he was, searching for home. He died 10 years later, probably never found the profound, enduring, settled experience of home. Why is this important to us when we look at the gospel? In order to understand the Beatitudes, I believe we have to read the entire Sermon on the Mount. If you want to experience Makarios, this sense of meaning, a deep sense of peace, inner peace, high personal value, you must be at home with yourself. I mentioned to you about 2 weeks ago that I was on retreat and I made a confession of my life. And when I went through all the narrative of my whole life, the light, the darkness, everything about my life, this wonderful holy priest who was hearing my confession blessed me and gave me the sacrament of reconciliation. And then he finished by saying, welcome home. Be at home with yourself. Forgive yourself. Be at peace with yourself. That's what home means. Read through chapter 5, 6, and 7 of Matthew, and here's what you'll find. You have heard it said of old, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, turn the other cheek. Don't be angry with your brother. Listen to the Sermon on the Mount. If you have something against your brother and you bring your gift to the altar, go back. Be reconciled first with your brother and then bring your gift to the altar. Go the extra mile. That's what it says. And Jesus says, if somebody goes to court with you over your tunic, give him your shirt as well. Be generous. Give the shirt off your back. That's what it says. Read through it. Don't be ostentatious. Don't be looking for public recognition. If you do a good deed or you pray in public, you have already received your reward. Go to your room, pray in private. Give your gifts in secret so that the God of love, who sees the gift that you give, he will bless you. Don't look for public applause. Read chapter 5, 6, and 7. And then embrace the teaching of Jesus. And then you will be given Makarios. How often must I forgive? 7 times? Jesus says, not 7 times. 70 times, 7 times. So how do I anoint and make holy the sacred space that I call home? How do I experience Makarios? If all you had for your Bible study or for your spiritual journey, if all you had was the Sermon on the Mount, it would lead you to glory. Gandhi would say that the Beatitude Sermon on the Mount, that as a Hindu, this would be salvation for him. Keep that in mind. So when you pause over the Beatitudes and wonder, what does this mean? Blessed are the poor in spirit. Makarios, those who are humble. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. In your home, those who mourn, who are lonely, who are misunderstood, who are carrying pain, they will be consoled. Blessed are the peacemakers, not those who advocate war or violence or arrogance. The peacemakers. God knows. Who are the peacemakers today facing an election We're caught in so much conflict and arrogance. There is no peace in the soul. It's a soul language. The kindness, the understanding, the patience. Blessed are the poor in spirit, the peacemakers. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for truth. Where do we go for truth? We're caught in a culture of fabrication, in a culture of misunderstanding, in a culture of severity, but peaceful. Peaceful are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for truth. So how do you understand? How do you understand today's gospel? And how do you seek inside yourself an experience of Macarius? Peace. Wow. The world cannot give it. Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount, don't pile up for yourself all the worldly things. Look at the birds of the air. Look at the seasons and the flowers. Don't pile up for yourself in greed all the things of the world, Jesus says. There's something deeper. There's something more profound for which our spirits hunger. Listening to the Sermon on the Mount, we make holy the place, the space we call home. Amen.